All right, Gary Dietrich, you're a political ninja. Uh, so much going on. Uh, I'm going to start with the redistricting in Texas, already a heavily gerrymandered state. Trump says, I want 5 more congressional seats, and they are serving up 5 more congressional seats. They do it in this inventive, severe, brutal fashion, but it is the brutality of American politics right now. And now the Democrats walk out of the legislature. They're all going to Illinois. They went on a chartered flight so that they can't vote these new maps in. And the GOP sort of hung up at this point as to moving forward. Now, I'll just say as an aside, and then I'll let you speak, of course. I don't think that, I was saying this before, this is a sustainable strategy. It brings attention to what's going on in Texas, which I think was the idea. But obviously, they have to return to the state at some point, and there are fines being imposed, et cetera. Give us a state of the state on all of this. And then what I really want from you is the California response.
Okay, so you have it exactly right. This is, you know, certain elements of the political spectrum are going to call it a publicity stunt. On the other end of the spectrum, they're going to say this is absolutely necessary highlighting, billboarding of our concerns. And so we need to do it. Now, here's the deal. You really hit on really the important pragmatic point of this, Mark, and that is it is not going to stop the process in Texas. Why? Because they can leave the state, which, by the way, it's not the first time Democratic legislators have done this. They've done it twice before in the last couple of decades, left the state to deny the legislature a quorum. They have to have a 2/3 quorum to be able to conduct business. But the problem for the Democrats, and they know this ultimately, and this happened in these 2 prior instances, there's now a 30-day special session called by Governor Abbott. But if they were to exhaust that and stay out of the state for that full period, which is in some people's minds also unlikely, he could simply call a new special session. And he can do that ad infinitum. So this is not sustainable or pragmatically efficacious long term, but it does bring a big spotlight to it. Interestingly, this time around, they're going to 3 big blue states, Illinois, New York, and let's see, what's the other one they're also going? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But the point of that is interesting too, Mark, because that's where the pressure point, along with California, which you wanted me to get to now, is Illinois and New York are the 2 other big blue states whose governors are now making noise. Okay, we're going to look at redistricting our states as well. So the destination, I mean, they could have gone to the Bahamas, but they went to these big blue states. And there's a reason for that politically. Now, California. Okay, Gavin Newsom's the one who's made the most noise and has the most, the largest delegation to try to, quote unquote, in their words, fight back about this. Here's the interesting math about it, that in California, you've got 52 congressional seats, lost one last time around for the first time in state history, but 52, only 9 of which are Republican. That means he's got to carve out more than half of the current Republican delegation, 5 out of the 9 seats he says he wants to try to get. Whereas in Texas, there are 13 Democratic seats out of the 35 total congressional seats in the Texas delegation. So you can see the map there. It's going to be even more heavy lifting in California to get those additional 5 Democratic seats than it is to get the 5 Republican seats in Texas. Now, if that doesn't have people confused, okay, well, I'm sorry.
Well, but let me follow up on that. But it's not just California, right? Just like it's not just Texas.
Right.
Ron DeSantis is saying we're going to do the same thing in Florida. We're going to give Donald Trump even more in the way of representatives in Florida. We're going to redistrict here. So New York and California, they've always reflected this sort of, at least part of the mainstream Democratic position, which is we don't want to be part of gerrymandering severely or intensely in a political way. We have nonpartisan boards, commissions, and they're going to be in control of redistricting any maps here in our states, in New York, California, et cetera. Now that may change. Now it's sort of like, okay, new game in town. We get it now. Take me to New York. Take me to some of these other blue states. In other words, could that gap that you just described, the heavy lift in California, be an easier lift in New York, for example?
Well, actually, let me back up one more word on California. Remember, Mark, that until 2008, we had partisan districting. And by the way, that term is not meant pejoratively initially. It simply means the legislature and the typically the governor, are the ones that draw the maps. That happened in California forever and ever. Amen. Most famously under our, well, some call him esteemed, some call him infamous Speaker Willie Brown, who has kind of a national reputation, who told me on air one time, Gary, the most important thing we do is draw our own districts. All right. So that happened forever until the people in 2008, through a ballot measure, changed that and put the redistricting commission in. Now, New York. I was drilling down more on this morning, Mark. And interestingly, and I haven't figured out all the mechanics of it yet. That's I'll be doing probably over the next few days. Have to. But Governor Hochul in New York apparently has even a tougher slog than California. And her redistricting effort, they say, may not actually take effect for several election cycles, meaning that in 26 at least, it wouldn't have impact, but potentially could, they say, I have to find out whether 28 is a possibility, but 30 and then 32.
Wow. So it sounds like in the brutality of redistricting and politics, it's going to be a lot harder for the Democrats to play the kind of hardball game that the Republicans are playing and keep the numbers going. That's sort of what I'm getting from you.
Yeah, I think that's true. But, to be fair about it, Mark, and I do try to be even-handed about this. There were some wildly skewed redistricting efforts under the former process in California. In fact, the process, by the way, was quite drawn out. The maps would be laid out in a room in the state capitol. Existing legislators would come in, complain about this, like that. And by the way, of both parties, because as you well know, part of this redistricting game has always been protect your own seats, right? Protect your own incumbents. And you still see this in the U.S. Capitol, where you'll have, incumbent protection is almost always 99% job one, whether you're a Democratic leader or Republican leader of a specific house. So that's just been the name of the game for obvious reasons for a long time. But we'll see where this all plays out. Right now, you'd have to say, there's, the odds are it's going to be more difficult for Democrats to get this done in the next 16 months for next fall.
Yeah, I mean, the clock is ticking, and this is a Trump edict that he wants those seats, and it looks like he'll get them in Texas. And to your point, the protection that they're providing to existing seats seems pretty ironclad. They're kind of counting in some of the redistricting. They're kind of counting on, and these are districts that, went for Donald Trump by pretty big numbers so that they know that they're pretty heavily red. They are counting on the Latino vote in a big way, which did go for Trump in a distinct fashion, as you know, in Texas. They're kind of counting on that still showing up. I would say that's the one thing that might be a little more of a question mark than it was the last election. So, I mean, this, what do they call it, a dumbmander? When you gerrymander, you try to gerrymander for yourself, and you end up screwing yourself somehow because of the redistricting. And so the only question mark I would say, I don't know if it's a dumbmander, but that Latino vote may not show up in the numbers for the midterm that they would like.
Well, you're raising an outstanding point, Mark, and that is sometimes you can be too smart for your own good, right? Or too weasel-like for your own good. And here's the deal. I mean, not only the Latino vote, but let's just say that the economy sours next year, whatever. Pick out any political, experience you'd like that could make it even tougher for already historically tough midterm election, right? The party in power in the White House typically, historically loses seats. So just imagine this scenario where you put more seats in play in places like Florida and Texas. But the problem is when you do that, by design, you have to dilute some of your own districts. It's unavoidable, right? You have to do that. But the math does, dictates if you're going to create more red districts, you got to peel off some red voters from red district incumbents and put them in blue districts. Okay, when you do that, you're making districts that potentially are more purple. So yes, it is quite possible in the political scheme of things that this could backfire and end up losing more seats than they would have otherwise in next year's midterms. One other thing that's interesting about this is going to create, and the Democrats are already saying this, some real headaches for Democrats. What do I mean? Remember that old game, musical chairs, when you're a kid, you pull out a chair, and now the big kid in the room has always got the sharp elbows. You know what I mean? Remember that? Okay, so try this on for size. You cut 5 seats out of California or Texas, Florida, wherever, New York. That means that your existing incumbents are going to be fighting each other for those seats, making it more difficult for your own party in these states, because now you're going to have, blood sport political battles amongst members of your own party.
That's absolutely what's happening in Texas too for the Democrats. I mean, they've in the redrawn maps are going to send at least 2 Democrats against each other in the midterms.
And that could happen for Republicans in California. Almost certainly would. Same thing in Illinois or New York.
Here's Gavin Newsom talking about California and the clapback against what's going on in Texas.
Like, what can we expect over the next couple of weeks, couple of months?
Well, we're reacting to the President of the United States and Governor Abbott trying to rig the election. They recognize they can't win in the midterms. All the momentum has shifted away from them. So they're doing what President Trump familiarly does, and that is trying to, dial for votes in Georgia. And now he's dialing up districts to maintain control and complete abdication of oversight, which is what Speaker Johnson's best known for. And I've said this many times, there's a growing recognition in this country, not just with Democrats, independents, but also Republicans, that de facto the Trump presidency ends in November of next year if the American people are given a fair chance and a voice and a choice. We will take back Congress. The President of the United States recognizes that, so he wants to rig the game, wants to change the rules midterm. They're very effective at this. They've done this in the past. They've got a lot of experience doing this. He dials up Greg Abbott, says, I need 5. Instead of 12,000 votes, Georgia, I need 5 House seats. He obliges. And they're doing a midterm rejection of objectivity and independence. A act that we could criticize from the sideline, or an act that we can respond to in kind, fight fire with fire in the spirit that brings us here together today. If so much wasn't at stake, our federal support for recovery efforts in Los Angeles that are not conditioned based on politics or the whim of a particular personality, if so many of our state grants, if so many of the values we hold dear weren't at stake, perhaps we wouldn't put a stake or plant a stake in the ground, but we feel very differently.
Yeah, so he's saying, look, this goes against the philosophical underpinnings of the country. The people's voice is being completely undermined, and if that's what you're going to do in Texas, we're going to do it in California. And you've just addressed the fact that it's just going to be a harder task in California.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Mark. Here's what we know for sure: everything that's going on now is going to inject a level of chaos in the midterms next year, right? I mean, you've got to get all these. Keep in mind, if California follows through on its plan, you've got to get maps drawn by the legislature. That is not easy, okay? 120 separate. I mean, you got to do legislative district. Well, we'll see. I guess they're not going to touch the state legislature, but you got 52 congressional maps you got to draw. Then you have to, there's been all this talk about, and our Attorney General Rob Bottoms in California said, okay, it's going to go to a special election. Then you have to conduct a special election, presumably this year. Some have said as early as the first Tuesday in November. I think that'd be a tough mark to meet. And then after that, it doesn't matter. Both sides, certainly, that don't feel well represented are going to court. And you got to get all that done in time for a primary election next June and have people file for those districts and run in them. This is going to create chaos in many, many states around the country like we have never seen in a midterm election.
Got to say, chaos is something Trump loves. He sows it, and he can take advantage of it politically. And now to Trump. The firing of the person who just heads the agency. I mean, she didn't come up with these figures. She sort of is she's clearly competent and clearly in charge of the agency. But as I say, a lot goes into this Bureau of Labor Statistic number that is oftentimes revised, as you're aware. And these revisions are typical. So they revise these unemployment numbers or employment numbers, you can look at them that way, and they're grim. And so he fires her, the head of the agency. it's the most gangsta move. It's like truly a. I mean, if I gotta say, if Obama or Biden had pulled this stuff, you would just never hear the end of it. Yet it's very on brand for Donald Trump. Don't bring me bad news. Don't challenge my narrative, which is that everything is going terrifically.
Well, this is one of those positions that you never hear about until you hear about it, right? I mean, whoever thought about the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whatever. Most Americans are going, I didn't even know there was such a bureau. I mean, I hear these jobs numbers things on my AM radio. Sometimes that's about it, or on the financial news channels. Interestingly, apparently she's been, frankly, a fixture in that agency for decades. She was just, a person working there, moving her way up the ranks, and then she got this job. And some important points to this, I think, are worth making in the broader context. This revision of jobs numbers has been a concern amongst many economists and business leaders for a number of years, and it's been growing. Take politics out of it. They say we have to update because of the change in our labor structure, right? The labor force structure. It's not as easy to measure some of this as it was in the past. How much do you include a gig worker or do you not, right? How much service workers? So many people have 3 or 4 different kinds of part-time jobs, right? Especially in the tech industry. They might work for several different kinds of things as a freelancer. So people have been saying for a while, this is creating increased volatility. And this has been true over the last number of years. The revisions up or down in these numbers have been far more dramatic than they have been in the past. And in fact, even nonpartisan economists are saying, the revisions now that we're getting over these last 3 months, the revisions of these 3 months jobs numbers are historically large. So this is part of the backdrop of this. The system for creating these numbers, no knock on the lady herself or even the Bureau, but the sort of the mechanism for creating these numbers, people see needs to be changed. Now, to the politics of it.
By the way, just let me just mention one thing. It's conceivable that the revision and the numbers relative to that revision are historically large because you have a guy who is in the White House. I don't mean to have Trump derangement syndrome, but come on, man. He's fired half the federal workforce. He's got ICE agents everywhere throwing people out of this country every 15 minutes. And he's got a tariff policy that has made businesses tentative about hiring and expanding. So for those reasons, it's conceivable that you could have a huge revision as a result of a huge economic policy that's on its side.
Yes, in highbrow places like my esteemed alma mater, the Kennedy School, the Chicago School of Economics, they would call this, Mark, an inflection point in the economy. Okay. What does that mean? That means you have a lot of big forces. It's sort of like the perfect storm thing. You have the three different forces you mentioned of, immigration out, so to speak, the tariff impacts and large federal employment cuts like we've never seen before. Those are all combining to make this a far more uncertain job counting environment than we've had maybe any time in our lifetime. So to your point, that's the so-called inflection point. It's harder to get accurate numbers when you have those forces all at work combined.
All right. Here's Murphy Rowan says, business owners like me have to report number of employees and total wages paid every quarter. It is mandatory, and the wages reported have to match your payroll tax report. So there are certain kind of boilerplate aspects of this that speak to its legitimacy. Play for Gary Dietrich and for everyone from Meet the Press this weekend. Go ahead, Tony, if you would, please. This is Kevin Hassett, who's the White House National Economic Council Director.
The jobs revisions, I literally called up that person and said, I think there's a typo, because I've been following these numbers all the way back when I worked with Alan Greenspan for something like 40 years, and I've never seen revisions like this.
But just to be very clear, I mean, there are 40 people put these numbers together. Is the president planning to fire all 40 people involved in putting these numbers together?
We're going to try to get the numbers so that they're transparent and reliable.
President Trump himself was happy to accept the jobs numbers issued under McIntyre's leadership when the numbers were good. Take a listen to what he said in the past.
The numbers were much better, as you know, than projected by the media.
In 3 months, we have created 350,000 jobs. Think of that.
A lot of jobs are being created.
That's what happened this morning. We saw the jobs.
So is the president prepared to fire anyone who reports data that he disagrees with?
No, absolutely not. The president wants his own people there so that when we see the numbers, they're more transparent and more reliable. And if there are big changes and big revisions, we expect more big revisions for the jobs data in September, for example, then we want to know why. We want people to explain it to us.
All right, but bottom line, were the numbers wrong? Do you have any hard evidence that you can present to the American public that these numbers, these revisions that were reported, and there were plenty of revisions under former President Biden, including right before the election, do you have any hard evidence that these numbers were wrong?
Yeah, there is very hard evidence that we're looking at the biggest revisions since
present those?
1968.
Are you gonna present
if
that
you look at the
evidence?
number itself, it is the evidence.
But just saying it's an outlier is not evidence, Mr. Hassett.
It's a historically important outlier. It's something that's unprecedented.
Still
so
doesn't-
unprecedented
it's still
that
not
I've been looking at it
evidence,
for
though.
40 years, and I'm like, it must be a typo.
Okay. All right. Let's.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the White House pushing back. I mean, it's great they do it so unflinchingly that it sounds legitimate, but the reality is, Gary, these numbers really are underpinned by a system that is fairly legitimate, wouldn't you say? I mean, the basic stats that go into the labor numbers, or were you alluding before to the fact that the whole thing has to be reimagined?
Well, I don't know that you have to go that far, and I'm not a professional economist, okay? But when you're listening to folks in that world who do this for a living, as well as, business folks who follow this stuff religiously, literally on a daily basis, right? Because they have to, hedge fund managers and all kinds of others, right? I mean, these jobs numbers, by the way, people must know this if you're a stock investor. These are a huge indicator and mover of stock prices. I mean, they are very closely linked and a prime indicator in most people's minds of the health of an economy and its direction. So I think, Mark, there's conversations now that, remember, under Biden, there and Trump was complaining about this. There were revisions of the numbers upwards, you remember, right? And the concern, I think, amongst some who do this for a living is we've got to find better ways so that our delta, as we say in the statistics world, right, our variance off the initial numbers, and this really confuses people. The federal government feels obliged to get a number out soon, right? As some indicator, not wait 3 months. They say, well, why don't you just wait? Because you don't want a 3-month lag on how the jobs market is doing, because the Fed and others, I mean, and business leaders for investment, they use this as an important tool. So I think the notion, Mark, is not a wholesale revision of the process, but a look at how can we make it more accurate so that the delta, the difference between the initial projections and the final numbers, is not so big, either up or down.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the timing has to be adjusted so that the revision isn't a revision of 2 months data, which is what we're looking at here.
But Mark, I will say,
yeah.
you're hitting on something important, and that is the use of any data for political purposes, right? And people over the decades have done this. Polls, they do the same thing, right?
Sure.
No candidate quotes a poll that isn't favorable to them. And they highlight ones when they are. Trump's done this famously, so have others. Remember that now, I mean, this may be a good drop for you, Mark, to pull this up somewhere. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? I mean, that has become like a political moniker. And so that's the challenge in all this. You want accurate data. I mean, frankly, I don't care. Most people should not care if it's accurate. Hey, take your medicine, Trump or whoever, and swallow it.
Well, good luck having that meeting with Trump. He's not a big one for taking his medicine. And so we successfully have seen the controversy and the political relevance, I think, which is still has some staying power, around Epstein move to the last thing we bring up in this conversation. And I think everything that happened with the economy and this economic news and the firing helped to bump Epstein off of the front page for the most part. But again, it's not going to stay that way. So we haven't had a chance to speak with you since Todd Blanche goes down to Florida, meets with Ghislaine Maxwell, takes no notes, apparently. There's no access to any kind of notes, and has this meeting. She is then moved to a different prison, which is sort of like a Club Fed type thing. Typically, people who've been involved in the kind of crime she was convicted of. She was not charged. She was charged and convicted. This human trafficking and child sexual assault. This stuff is not, it's disqualifying when it comes to putting you in a Club Fed. These are white-collar criminals in Club Fed typically. Anyway, she's now moved to Club Fed. So just to review, Trump's not going to release these Epstein files, says that they're this, that. I barely know him. I was on the plane with, and whatever. The number 2 at the Justice Department, his former personal attorney, meets with her. She's moved to this Club Fed, as I say. All this happens in a week. I mean, clearly a deal has been made here. Now, you can opine on this if you want, but I really feel I want to exploit your political acumen because the relevance of this politically was really hot beginning about a month ago. Handicap this for me as to its relevance moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned this when it first came out, Mark, about a month ago. And that is, everybody always points to, from a political point of view, you point to 2 things. Is it going to affect your votes in Congress from president? And is it going to affect your midterm votes next year? And if you were running for re-election, you'd always be looking at that. Is it going to affect your re-election? Those, political strategists sitting around a table, those are the 3 numbers they're going to look at. And in the shorter term, the 4th category, you could say, is your current poll numbers. And how will that affect your standing, right? In terms of your clout politically, your messaging to the public, your messaging to your own members of Congress, your donors, et cetera. So that's the raw politics sitting around a table that people would look at. The reason Epstein has moved off the page, a lot of people say, Trump's been wanting to move it off of the page. Hey, seriously, we can all agree this has not been a positive story for the White House, no question about it. But one of the biggest logistical challenges right now for people that want to keep it in the spotlight, Congress is now in recess. And it's been the congressional pressure, Mark, especially from Democrats, but increasingly, as from members of the president's own party who said they're going to force this issue either through a vote of Congress or more investigations or the appointment of a special counsel demand, et cetera. And with them out of town and back in their districts, it's harder for those elements to move forward. Does that make sense? So until they get done with the August recess, I think some of this is going to be a little bit back burner, plus the fact that there right now isn't an element of this moving through the courts. If Maxwell was actually in her trial process now, and as well, is she going to get pardoned anyway? You see what I'm saying? There's not concrete actions right now as you speak today to put this back on the front page.
I see you've got that Michael Wolff thing up, Tony. Is that what he was talking about, Epstein, and the extent to which Trump will go to suppress this? Michael Wolff, interesting to me, and I'm keeping you over time here, but we're finishing up. Michael Wolff, interesting to me because he both a Trump biographer in a sense, a reporter, journalist, writer on Trump, and similarly on Epstein as well. So he had kind of a window into both. Do you have that up? I just wanted to see. Is that what you have, Tony, or what's the situation with the Michael Wolff video? No, I can pass on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pass on it then. But his basic proposition, which comes as no surprise, is look, Trump will stop at nothing to suppress this Epstein information. That Trump is, was best friends with Epstein for many, many years, and it would be to strain credulity to think that he didn't know a bit of what was going on, and even Wolff was suggesting participated on some level, but it's a little unclear as to, it seems as though that's the gray area, and maybe that's the most politically damaging, was why I mentioned it to you. All right, so Epstein is pushed off the front page, as you say, for all the reasons you suggest. There's no trial to follow, et cetera. It's really up to MAGA Nation that was outraged a few weeks ago to continue outrage, and then that will vault it back up into the front page.
I think, Mark, to your point, though, 2 things I think right now remain key. There's never been any debate, and there isn't right now from any serious corner, Republican or Democrat, that Maxwell didn't do what she did. There's widespread agreement. She is a serial child trafficker from all accounts and a serial child abuser from all accounts and an accomplice. There's no disagreement about that set of facts that I hear of any consequence. And the second thing is this is not going away. Okay. And it may be more, it's been picked up by the Democrats, as you know, and driven by it. But the MAGA base is not done with this. I mean, that's clear. So those two powerhouses, the Democratic machine, you know, and his own MAGA base, are not going to let this go away. So my expectation, Mark, is that when Congress comes back into town in September, this gets fired up again.
All right, Gary Dietrich, everybody. And I should mention Gary Dietrich's segment is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, that's really Bill Campbell's area of supreme expertise. If you want a highly respected real estate professional, it is Bill Campbell. Remax Gold. Call or text him 530-448-7474. Again, you can text him 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.